Recurring injuries can not only keep you off the field, but they can also interfere with your day-to-day activities. Well, what if there was someone you could trust to find out what those injuries are, to dig deeper to discover the root of the problem? Well, there is. His name is Michael Griffith, and his background in physical therapy put traditional methods in the back of his mind and his ideas in the forefront.
I'd walk into the clinic, see somebody sitting on a stool with a knee problem, doing something that's completely unrelated to their sport. If they're a football player or golfer, they'd be sitting down doing something and they'd be using their leg to pull themselves around on this stool to work on a hamstring injury. And I'd step back and say, kind of take the panoramic view, what does that have to do with their sport? Nothing at all. It's irrelevant. It may work the hamstring, but it's not a functional way of training the hamstring. It's not going to help the hamstring do better on the field. It may help with, if you're a bodybuilder, but that's not going to carry over to improving your performance on the field. So I just started getting away from that and looking at more what sports performance has to do with the sport, whether it's golf, baseball, football, try to help them out.
Griffith first uses a testing grid called the matrix he designed to measure certain components like reach, balance, and strength.
So on that right side, he's got pretty good motion. He can reach through, the quality looks good, he can reach a lot further. But when he gets to the left here, he can't reach as far. The quality of motion is worse, and he just has to bail out. It's a biomechanical approach, and it's mostly for guys with a chronic problem that's not getting better with traditional therapy. Like Jeremy here, he had a knee problem. In a traditional context, he's going to be doing knee exercises. And there's a place for that, but that's not enough to get him back to the sport. It doesn't address the causes. What's causing his knee to take the hit? Why is it getting chewed up? And that's where a biomechanical approach, looking at the hip, looking at the foot, everything that feeds the knee, and then building that into a sport-specific program.
Jeremy Gray, a minor league footballer who's played overseas and at home for the Oklahoma Thunder, has a torn meniscus in his left knee. His is among the 70% of injuries that are non-impact. And he is all for Griffith's non-traditional biomechanical approach.
Every doctor that I've been to before, the first thing he does, he lays you down on your back, he checks the side movement, he checks the lateral movement, pushes it up, pushes it down, try to figure out what the problem is. Michael went beyond that. Michael wants to figure out what's wrong with the whole deal, not just the knee itself. You can fix the knee all you want, but if you're still doing the same things over and over and over, you're going to injure the knee again. The difference between most doctors is they just want to fix the problem. If they can't find it, they're going to give you cortisone shots, they're going to give you rest, ice, compression, elevation. And I've been going through that stuff ever since I had complete reconstructive knee surgery, and it's always been a problem.
A lot of the training I saw that was being done, a lot of the treatments were all in this sagittal plane, which is straight up and down, and they neglected this transverse plane rotation. And that's the plane of injury, it's the plane of power, and I really emphasize that plane because it's usually not being addressed.
Griffith uses more dynamic movements like the cone drill to focus on agility to further assess the problem. And he utilizes other drills too, specific to the sport. The point here is that compensation for an undiagnosed issue leads to tightness and weakness and inevitably breakdown. And in Gray's case, the symptoms are at the knee, but the cause is not.
Within just a few minutes, Michael could tell that my hips were tight. He noticed that my legs were longer than the other. I've actually had a physical therapist ask me about that before, but there was nothing followed up on it. And Michael's already showed me that there's exercises I can do, there's elevation things I can have for my feet.
Doing a laying down kind of assessment, you might be able to pick some of that up, but you're taking gravity out of the picture, so we're just going to address gravity, address 3 planes of motion, all with a specific drill.
Now, Griffith doesn't knock the conventional methods. He says they're great for treating acute symptoms. He doesn't treat symptoms, but rather finds the cause. To find him, fire up your Cox high-speed internet and log on to 3dperformancesystems.com.